every stop I make, one or more people come up to me and say, I've had it with the whole system. I'm full-blown separatist because we are going to get it worse than ever. I'm hearing that from people, and it's not with glee they say that. It's not with chauvinism they say that. It's with a sense of depression and resignation that the system just screws the West. And so I come to Lorne Gunter's column in today's Edmonton Sun. Let me read you the headline. It looks like Screw the West is back in full swing. And joining us now via Skype from Edmonton is Lorne Gunter, senior columnist with the Edmonton Sun. Lorne, you're right, and I hear it unprompted everywhere I go in Alberta.
Yeah. You hear people with a deep sense of resignation about it. There is no joy in it. There isn't even really a lot of anger. I mean, there is anger, of course, but there's more of a sigh, like, okay, well, we should have seen this coming, but here it is again. And interesting, you said, you hear it all over. You're also hearing it now in 2019 from people you wouldn't have heard it from in the past. Mm-hmm. There's an awful lot of people I'm hearing from who are very powerful people, mm-hmm. very successful professionals, mm-hmm. Who really can't be bothered with the hustle and bustle, or the hurly-burly, as it is, of war and battling and things. Their lives are pretty good, and mm-hmm. they don't want things disrupted. They tend to be establishment types, mm-hmm. and you're hearing it even from them. I mean, in most revolutions, and separation, whether it's in Alberta or Quebec or somewhere else, is a kind of revolution. Mm-hmm. Most revolutions don't come from people in the elites. Right. They come from people in the middle class, right. and people who are otherwise very comfortable. And you're starting to hear that more. You know what? I never thought of it that way. I think of Brexit. I think of separatism in Quebec. All the banks, like you say, the establishment, they're for the status quo because the status quo suits them just right. I mean, works for them very well. Wall Street, very much a status quo kind of place. They even made their accommodations with Obama and Hillary. But I know, in fact, there's some very wealthy, very powerful Alberta players, and a vocal example of this is Brett Wilson. I don't think he's quite a billionaire, but he's a centimillionaire. He's just had it. He's had it with the fact that not just that Alberta and the West in general is being undone, but that it's being done so perniciously, whimsically, gleefully. Let me give you one anecdote and I'll throw it right back to you. When Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, he had a habit, it irritated some Westerners. Whenever he would give a speech or answer a question, he would do it first in French, then in English. Always first in French. And Albertans would say, "What are you doing, buddy?" And the answer was clear. He was trying to make an effort, trying to show that even though he was an Anglo from Alberta, he still wanted Quebec to be part of his Canada, even if the feeling wasn't reciprocated. We see the exact opposite with Justin Trudeau. He's not making efforts, even though, like, he could say, all right, Albertans hate me, but I'm still going to do things to show them I don't hate them back. No. Trudeau is gleefully digging in. I'm certain that he's going to meet with Greta Thunberg one more time, that anti-oil extremist teenager. I'm certain of that. He bashes the oil sands. He talks about phasing out the oil sands. He's demonizing the West in a way that Harper would never dream of doing to Quebec. I think just quickly on the Thunberg thing, I think he'd like to meet with her, but I don't think he's going to, because she doesn't think there's any politician in the world now who's doing enough. And she'll scold him, which, as she sort of did in New York when they met a couple of weeks ago. She'll excoriate him for having not taken the last 4 years to make huge changes to Canada's life. As if a 16-year-old would know that. I mean, she's a very, very smart kid. I don't doubt that for a second. But you need a little bit more life experience to go with your intelligence. Yeah. But anyway, the point that I made in the column today is that in the 1980 federal election, that was the one Joe Clark had come in. He'd miscounted how many people were in the House of Commons one night. The Liberals very cleverly sabotaged Clark's minority government and forced another election. They coerced cajoled Trudeau to come back and run one more time as their leader, and he won a majority. But the unofficial slogan inside the Liberal war room in 1980, and we know this because there was a Liberal strategist who went on to become a very senior part of the Liberal establishment, a guy named John Duffy, who was working there with Keith Davey, who was the longtime campaign manager for Liberals, and he said their motto inside the war room in 1980 was, screw the West, we'll take the rest.
Yeah.
They knew they were going to have trouble winning seats in all of Western Canada, and indeed they did. They didn't win any in BC, Alberta, or Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. They won only 2 out of 77 Western seats that time, and they knew that. But they knew that going after the oil industry and going after the West would make them popular enough in Quebec in particular, and to some extent in Ontario and Atlantic Canada, that they could carry those regions and they didn't need Western votes. Mm-hmm. And I think you're starting to see that now. In the French leaders' debate last week, they spent about the first half hour talking about the environment. And the BQ were adamant that Alberta, by name, was the problem. But Trudeau was adamant too. He just didn't say Alberta. He has this passive-aggressive way of dealing with it. Yeah. But he would never have said the things he said about the oil and gas industry, and by implication about Alberta, if it was the hydroelectricity industry and Quebec. Yeah. He would never say the same thing.
You know, it's funny you mentioned. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's what's going to propel the anger in Alberta if the Liberals win this election. And here's the scenario I think is even more likely. Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives will win the greatest number of seats, but it's not going to be like it was in 2008 when Harper had a minority, but he had twice as many seats as anybody else. And then the 3 other parties tried to get together and eradicate the will of Canadians and overturn the results of the election, and the Governor General stopped them. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's going to be very, very close. The Liberals are currently in power. They can say by convention in Canada's Constitution that we are all in power. We think we can hold the confidence of the House. We don't think the Conservatives can. Madam Governor General, will you give us the chance to form the government? And so you'll have the Liberals in second place forming a government that is decidedly anti-Alberta. And I can't predict with accuracy what's going to happen in Alberta if that happens.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show, which is a show I do every day. I do a monologue, interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at premium.rebelnews.com.